My guest for today is very special in that I don't think I've ever interviewed a translator before. But yeah, welcome, Vivian. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I just want to get right into it. How does one even get to be a translator?
Well, obviously, I don't do professional translation for a living. I am just, I'm bilingual. I was born and raised in Taiwan, and I came over here to the United States for school. And I did go to like international school before I went into college, so that kind of gave me an edge as to being almost entirely fluently bilingual. Um, so although I'm not like professionally trained, I don't have any, I've never went to like translation school or whatever. But I do have the ability to like translate things. As to how I, got this position or like how I was able to work on these huge international events. I, as corny as it is, but it really was just kind of networking. I was just reached out um by one of my kind of by one of my friends who's working in the APAC region of Riot, and he basically just asked me like, so would you like to be the translator for our LCP finals? That was the first kind of proposal, not proposal. That was like the first opportunity that was offered to me, and I was like, of course, I'd love to do that because I have been kind of translating content from the LCP, specifically from the Taiwanese teams on Twitter. I've been doing that over the summer a lot, and really for me, the end goal was always to kind of actually bridge the gap between the APAC region and the West in general, just because a lot of things were kind of blocked or a lot of information wasn't able to get through just purely because of language barriers. So I feel like having this opportunity to actually officially represent LCP was um, amazing for me. I think that was just like right into what I kind of wanted to do. And yeah, and so eventually it just also turned into, yo, by the way, do you also want to do worlds? Of course, I love to do worlds, So yeah, it's got like that.
Now, translating is this very finicky thing where you're translating League of Legends, and I have personal experience of working with translators who are there because they speak both languages, not even fluently, but they can communicate in both language, and they don't know what
Mhm,
League of Legends is. They don't know what a
mhm,
champion is. And I've
mhm,
had experiences where I'm like, I know what the person is trying to say, but that's not
mhm,
what that's not what I mean.
mhm.
You obviously you play League of Legends. You know the game, you watch it, you're very passionate about it. How did you? Let's just start first on a more positive side. How did you get into League of Legends?
It was I think it was when I was around 12, I think. I was, I think I always played video games, but my parents never really allowed me to spend any money on video games, and that includes getting a PC because I was given like a MacBook Air because of schoolwork, right? Like we needed a laptop for schoolwork, but I wasn't allowed to kind of get anything else other than that. So when my friends asked me, "Hey, play League of Legends, it runs on our MacBook," I was like, "Okay, yeah, sure." And I I was 12. League of Legends was very, very complicated to me. I didn't really, I didn't know how it worked. So I was playing on a trackpad because I didn't know you needed a mouse. I was also, mind you, I was studying in Taiwan at this point. But all of my friends were playing on the NA server for some reason. So all of us were just taking that 200 ping in Taiwan. And I was playing on my trackpad. And mind you, at one point I played Kalista. I have no idea how I did that. Like, that was insane. So, but like, I obviously the learning curve was already steep for someone who has like proper peripherals and a good ping. Not to mention me, 12 years old, like try to navigate all of that. So I think I was pretty quickly like discouraged by the gameplay just because of like, oh, a game takes like 30, 40 minutes, and like my mom always tells me to do something. I'm tired of telling her I cannot. I'm playing a game, So at some point I stopped playing it mostly because it's very time consuming and very hard for me. Um, and then throughout high school, I think I picked it up back in high school when my new friend group kind of told me they're like longtime players. They've been playing since elementary school. And this when I was okay, you know what, I'll give it another shot. And then I realized, oh, you need to play on the right server. But during that kind of blank period of me kind of like stepping away from actually being on the Rift, I was of I was still very like closely following league news related things because I do feel like, you know, as someone who, even if you don't play this game every single day, there's still a lot of content to consume. I will still keep up with like all the new champion releases, all the new splash art skins, whatever, like esports. I was also following all of that. So when I kind of played the game again, when I picked it back up in high school, it was kind of seamless because I already knew what was going on. Like there wasn't 20 new champions that I don't know the abilities of because I was keeping up with all of that, even though I wasn't playing the game. But yeah, I don't think I was ever like really good at it. I think I was just like I just enjoy playing things with other people, and League is a game that almost everybody plays. And also there's just a lot of things that's outside of the game that's going on the internet as well. So yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just unlocked by the fact that you guys went out of your way to play on a North American server, the furthest server that you could play. I guess CBLOL, maybe the Brazilian server would have been further, but still.
True. I think it's partially because I don't think that's entirely the reason though, because my other friends were playing on like a Windows operating system. But the Taiwanese server previously, it wasn't owned by Riot. It was owned by this like local telecom company. And if you download their client, it only works on a PC. It only works on the Windows operating system. So for me, I couldn't even play the Taiwanese server if I wanted to. But like regardless, all of my friends who had a PC were also playing on that. I don't know why they just told me to play on North America, but yeah, that was good. That was a little rough, not gonna lie.
Yeah. Now, something you mentioned is you kept up with like professional league esports. You were like in general involved even when you weren't playing, and that's going to be very important for us here because I don't know if you saw the Red Bull event, but there was the situation where a translator was kind of like not really translating the question or the answer of what a pro was saying, a T1 member. He was kind of just like giving a really bad TLDR. And I've had situations with translators as well where like I'll ask something and I speak Korean, just not confidently. So I'll ask a translator to say, and I speak Portuguese as well. And I think it happened more often in maybe Portuguese, but I'll ask a question. He'll translate the question and be like, no. And then I start speaking Portuguese. I'm like, what was the point of having a translator? Or in Korean, like I will stop them halfway through their translation and be like, no, that's not what I said. Like, could you like give those details because they're important. I've listened to you translating. You specifically translate like the LCP region. You do a good job of like knowing the memes, knowing like what is being referenced by certain items and champion names and things like that. I think that's very important for translation. But I wanted to get from your experience because I'm usually the one doing the interview. And then I'm like frustrated if my translator isn't getting my point across, if I even know, right, that they're doing that. But I'm also very grateful for people like Jisun, people like that do a phenomenal job. And I can tell like, oh, they didn't just translate it. They translated the joke, even if it didn't make sense in their language. They found this like a replacement for it. I think it kind of makes or breaks an interview, but you don't really see that or feel that because you're kind of just like, in the middle, you're almost like a connecting stick, like a Wi-Fi connection. No one gives you the praise, but you know, you do a lot of the work. So from your perspective, working with, you know, obviously other translators and whatnot, what's like the most difficult aspect, and how do you ensure that all of the people that are working understand like League of Legends, professional league lingo?
Mm-hmm. I think like I said, I don't think I've had like a lot of translating experience yet. I've been to 2 international events when I was in Vietnam for the LCP finals and worlds. I have seen scenarios where it's like people are trying to translate something that has a league reference in it, but they either are not familiar with the title being League of Legends, or they don't know the direct translation of like the official translation in another language. I think the good thing is that I feel like most people, players and journalists both included, they're both usually very knowledgeable about this game. So even if there is like this subpar translation of, you know, a very direct translation of a very literal translation of something that's not an official, for example, like an item in the game or maybe a specific player or whatever. I think the good thing is that most players and journalists are able to like infer that even from like a bad translation. But I don't think I've ever seen just like in person like a terrible case of that happening. I think it's largely due to the fact that I've only been translating like official Riot game events, and I feel like they usually have like translators like above a certain quality. And also, no, it's just that actually. It's just like I feel like the events that I've been to, I've always seen like high quality translations. It would something like not familiar with like a very common game like word. I don't think I've ever happened to me. And when it comes to like not being able to translate certain jokes, whatever, again, I don't think I've ever like sat in on someone else's translations, but I've also heard a lot about not only just from you, but from my other journalist friends saying that like, well, I speak this language, just not as well for me to like conduct an interview fluently. So I do need a translator, but also like I can tell that my translator isn't translating me properly, or they're like letting out certain important details. They're cutting their sentences short. They're changing their tone of the subject, whatever. And I don't know, like, well, for example, I was kind of recruited just by getting reached out, and I mean, we both got lucky. We all got lucky that I was someone that was able to translate decently. But I'm not sure how other translators are recruited, I guess. Like I don't know what is the screening process in terms of that. And I don't really know like how's the application, how they're interviewed, whatever. So I can't really, I guess I don't really know how they're selected. And I'm not too sure as to what is the solution to, I guess, conducting a better interview, conducting an interview that doesn't have its quality reduced by the quality of the translator. But yeah, it is something that I am very aware of, and I know is very common. And a lot of times we've seen multiple cases where certain interviews are, I guess, taken out of context or like mistranslated, and then it just blows out of proportion, whatever. And I feel like unfortunately that's just something that's kind of unavoidable, especially if during interviews the translation only happens during the interview, and there's no one kind of screening it or kind of double checking it afterwards. Like to me, okay, well I don't know if this is allowed, but for like I guess journalists that I personally know, I usually after the interview I always ask them, hey, if you want, send me the transcript and I'll check it again, because even I make mistakes sometimes. Like I would on spot, maybe I can't put out like a complete sentence, or like I forgot what the player said, whatever. And usually with the transcript, I can do a more accurate translation that kind of mitigates my manual errors, stuff like that. So I feel like that could be a way to mitigate that. But I do know that it's logistically kind of impossible, just because the only reason why I was able to do it is because I personally know these people. And like that isn't a part of our like I guess official job description. Like we don't have to like work after hours. And also I do know that most journalists say, especially if it's like a interview on this specific match of this day, the interview needs to be published the day of and not tomorrow, like tomorrow, not the day of. So usually that back and forth might take some time. So I am aware that it's kind of like logistically difficult. But I feel like that could be a way to mitigate that.
So that you actually brought up two of the things that I wanted to mention, which is they're like, I understand that as a translator, there's so much pressure on you. Because one, Riot in general give you a limited amount of time with the interview and the interviewee, right? Translation takes up a big chunk of time because basically it doubles everything that's being said. So it functionally cuts your amount of time that you have in half, if not a little bit more. That's number one. Number two is you need to get your translations across as efficiently. Like you don't want to take the entire time translating one question. The other thing is you need to remember, like you said, what did the player say? What was the question? What was the tone of the question? You need to like remember if it's a question that takes like, let's just say I took 90 seconds asking a question. I spent the first 45 seconds giving context, the second 45 seconds bringing up the main issue, and the last 15 seconds or like the last few seconds actually saying what I wanted to hear from the player. You have to then remember all of that and then realize, okay, maybe this doesn't actually make sense in Chinese. Maybe this is like not just doesn't make sense. Maybe that's a very cultural reference that he's making that my player would not understand. There's all of this like happening instantaneously in your mind that puts all that extra pressure, like you said. So talk to me a little bit more about like the actual process of doing the interview and what are like your priorities when trying to translate what like a Dago interview, for example.
Yeah, for sure. I think, well, for a lot of translators, they usually have like a little notepad or they write some things on their phone. So I've seen, I was told as well, I was like advised that I could do it. And I was also seeing, like I was observing other translators. They usually have like the little card that they write out or they pull out their notes out on their phone to just kind of like jot down whatever the question was. I had a notepad with me and that was what I did in Vietnam. But I somehow like just forgot to do it at Worlds and it just went okay. So like I guess. And I feel like I guess I was lucky. I was also lucky that none of my interviews that I was translating was extensively long or like they had like really long context or questions that I had to like translate like bar for bar. I have faced a few scenarios where it's just like when they were asked about, oh, what do you think about the game or like what happened during the game, and then the players or coaches they would start like breaking down every game of the series, saying that yeah, in game one we did this and that, in game two it was this, and then this player did that, and in game three it was that, and that was the moment that I would be like, okay, no, I do need to write this down because I don't know, I can't like remember the specific details, and I think that's also largely due to how I guess real time translate, like the method I do it in, because instead of I just don't know what other methods there are, but to me I try to understand, like actually intake the information that the interviewer is giving me, like actually understanding the question and then kind of resynthesizing it in another language, in Chinese or mostly in Chinese because it's usually like English to Chinese. But instead of like trying to make myself memorize like word for word or like phrases to phrases, I try to understand the question myself first and then spewing it back out to the interviewee. But I don't know if it's like everybody does that or whatever, but I think to me that would allow me to kind of, especially when there's certain sentences or certain contexts or certain events that, for example, maybe the interviewer took a long time to explain or give context to, but I can kind of condense that into a sentence or two in Chinese, maybe because it was a popular reference in Taiwan, or maybe because you guys were referencing something about just like APAC history, and for example, like obviously the players would be very well versed in that, and so I would need to give a little bit less context to say, okay, this year that team, remember when he played on this team, and he would be like, yeah, I know that. So for example, it's like stuff like that. I would kind of also just for my own purposes, like so I don't have to like memorize every single like bar for bar what you guys said. But yeah, I try to actually like understand the question as if I am being interviewed and then translate that back out to the player.
So how much of like bar for bar or like literal translation uh, do you try to do, or is that like is it ever a concern of like, okay, if I'm translating what the player is saying and I know that this is going to be a headline, for example, do I soften what he said because maybe in Chinese it's actually not as harsh as in English, but the word would like, how much of that is okay, I'm just going to say what he said because that is what he said, and how much of it is here is a rephrasing of what he said. It might not be word for word because he just spoke for 30 seconds and I can't remember every single thing that he said word for word.
Mm-hmm. I think usually, like you said, when it comes to like those hard, heavy hitting questions or like headlines, when I hear a question, I know that, oh yeah, they're gonna like make this the title. That is something that like I guess make note of, not make note of, but like I notice, I guess. And I don't think I've ever like purposely censored any like responses or like try to tone down anything that they said. But I think again goes back to the understanding part. I think it more importantly is understanding their tone. Like for example, if players said something, let's say if literally translated or if let's say if they were tweeting something, and then if you like click Google Translate, and it will like turn into it will be translated into something like, I guess, a little more like direct or a little more mean. I think it is also on me to kind of like understand what is I guess, context and the tone that the player was saying it in. If he was just like joking, then I would try to like resemble that tone when I translate it back. But like sometimes it doesn't, like sometimes translating it literally like does a job as well. So I think it's just like, for me, it's mostly understanding, again, like understanding the tone, understanding the message that they're trying to get across, and then rephrasing it in my own way. But usually it wouldn't deviate too much from what they said originally anyways. Like if people like put it side by side, they'll be like, oh yeah, that makes sense anyways. But I think instead of being like a human Google translator who just like translates everything like literally like word for word, I do try to like understand, I guess, the context that they're saying, like the tone, or like, kind of read them a little bit as to like, did they, hesitate a little bit before saying something? Did they say this because they're media trained to say it? If like, for example, if that's the case, then I would obviously translate their like literal media trained response, whatever. But in like another, maybe like in a more extreme case, if they were asked like, oh, what do you feel? Do you think this player is good or not? And they said like, oh no, he sucks. And obviously I would try to like gauge what his tone is, like whether he genuinely think that he sucks, or is this just like, I think he could improve, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to like verbalize all of this, my thought process, I guess. But I think just most importantly, I try to understand their tone and try to replicate that tone. Yeah, I think that's the approach that I tried to.
Yeah, you clearly have never translated a Buppo interview, thankfully, because like that guy can speak for like 3 minutes, and then you're like, okay, wait, you just talk about 6 topics within 3 minutes, and all of them he like would require a PhD to explain. What the hell am I supposed to explain? But I guess, how much is time a factor? Like, is there a push of like, hey, try to be as concise as possible because the interviewers only have a certain amount of time? Is that not a consideration?
I was never like explicitly told that, hey, can you just like condense what they said because we're running out of time. No one has ever, like, I've never faced that problem before. I feel like I've never it's not something that I pay much attention to. I try to match the length of my translation to what the player said. Because again, I think I try to avoid just summarizing what they said, or like condensing, or like just like I tried to avoid altering anything that the player said, or like restructuring anything. The only scenario where I would do that is if they talk about a lot of like extensive specific scenarios in game, for example, or like just like specific very details that that was supposed to support their bigger argument, or like their bigger, like, I guess, thesis sentence, whatever. And I either cannot remember everything that they said, or I feel like it's kind of irrelevant to like list everything, especially sometimes I don't feel like it's useful information for the interviewer as well. Then I was like, okay, well, he mentioned a lot of like mistakes that he made during mid game. And he also mentioned how maybe like during laning phase he wasn't doing as well. Like, I would condense it like that, instead of maybe saying that like, oh yeah, like during 20 minutes, like at the Baron Pit, we did this and that. Like that was the only I think that would be the only part where I would like consciously shorten, not only due to just like time, but also because I can't remember everything, and I've like, after my own evaluation, I felt like this is something that I can leave out and wouldn't, like, I guess, change the message that he was trying to get across. But other than that, I don't think I've ever been, I guess, told or just like reminded even that, hey, look at the time, like we're running out of time.
Okay, I meant more as like a general thing of like, hey, every single player only gets to do the interview for whatever amount of time. Like, don't take too long every question, just to give the player as much time as possible. That kind of thing. Not like within the actual interview, but as like a overarching like mentality. No? Okay.
I don't think so. I mean, I was I am very aware of like how I guess little of the time each interviewer gets, because like I would be there whenever they're like swapping in and out. I would be with the guy who's scheduling the interviews, who's calling journalists in and out. And so I am very well aware of like how tight of a time that journalists are often on, and they always, oftentimes they'll be like, oh, we're running out of time. I guess I'll just ask the last question, or something like, oh, I guess we have more time, then I can ask more questions. That they would just like think about it for a second, because like they don't expect themselves to like have this much time with the player or whatever. So I'm
I wish
aware of
that
that,
happened to
but I
me.
was never. I know. So I was never like explicitly told that, hey, keep it as short as possible or something.
All right. Now, what actually happens in between translate? Because you were at Worlds, right? You stayed there for up until quarterfinals, right? Well, that's when CFO lost.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Let me move back one extra step. When you were translating for the LCP, you only how did the translation process work when you do English to Chinese, but then you had a team in GAM which didn't speak English or Chinese? So like, if you needed a GAM player to go from Vietnamese to Chinese, would it go Vietnamese Chinese, or would it go Vietnamese English English Chinese? Like how did that chain work?
Yeah. So, oh, by the way, it was TSW who was
Oh,
at
I'm so
LCP.
sorry, not GAM. Yeah, TSW.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they are also like a Viet team. So what happened was we have two other Viet translators who was taking care of Viet to English and Viet to Chinese. So most of the time, yes, you guys have probably seen me like on stage with CFO one on the grand finals, whatever. And that was when I was actually like in front of a camera, I guess. But other times I was translating during press conferences when journalists are like, it's just like a private room where journalists. It's kind of like an interview, like how Worlds was doing it, but it was just like in another kind of behind the camera place. So what happened was, if it was a Chinese, if it was a team that spoke Chinese, which was PSG or CFO, it would be me and the Viet to Chinese translator who's like working, because usually questions will either be asked in English, which would be my job, or they will be asked in Chinese, which no one have to do anything, or it will be asked in Viet, where it's the Viet to Chinese translator's job. And if it's a Viet team up there, then I don't need to do anything, because I can't speak Viet. So it's usually like that. And there will also be I remember before the match, before the 2-day weekend started, there was a press conference where we invited like some people from Riot, some people from the Viet government, whatever. And there will be because they were speaking English on stage, and there will be scenarios where Taiwanese or Chinese reporters, they would ask questions, and I would be the one that was like translating from Chinese to English. But yeah, essentially we have three translators, because there are also a lot of just like reporters who spoke Chinese over there, and when they had to like ask the Viet team's questions, that would be when the third Viet Chinese translator comes into play.
Yeah, that seems very interesting that your region specifically, because of the fact that it's a culmination of many different countries, actually speaks multiple languages, and so you need more than just one translator. Because some teams, like you said, don't even speak the same language, which I find interesting. You're competing in the same league, but you speak different language. So going into Worlds, what is the behind the scenes of like? Are you just hanging out all day? Are you waiting until they call you? Are you like in a room with all the other translators and they just like pick one of you out? Like what are you doing while you're not translating, I guess?
Yeah, so I guess this is also gonna be very
One
interesting,
second.
just because
I
of.
think I can't hear you, but I'm not sure if it's on me or on you.
Uh,
Okay, I hear you. Awesome.
okay. But yeah, this is very interesting, because I mean, although I am a translator and I do a lot of things, but sometimes like I feel like I'm homeless most of the time, because most translators there were English to Chinese, right? But they're like from China, like Chinese to English translators, and they have a lot of things to do, because there's, first of all, there's a lot of Chinese teams there, and second of all, there's a lot of just like miscellaneous like Chinese to English things to kind of work on.
Like
Especially
what? Uh,
like for example, because the event was like in China, right? So like the hosts, whatever, they're all speaking Chinese. And maybe there's like just like video translation, this video subtitle translations that need help. But it's just, I think overall, most importantly, it's just because there's a lot of press interviews that were conducted in Chinese and English, and these were like usually media, like journalists from China, and so obviously they would use the Chinese to English translator from China,
Yeah, so
preferably, right?
just to clarify, even though you speak English and Chinese, you were specifically only for the LCP teams. You did not translate anything for the LPL teams, even though you
No,
could.
Yeah, I could, but also because there were a lot more Chinese to English translators, and I was the only one that was like Taiwanese Chinese to English, so they didn't really put me on anything because, well, obviously because they don't need me. They had a lot of those translators, but also just because they wanted to save me for the LCP teams, obviously. But basically, most of them they just hung out in the press room and where the interviews were, and I'm pretty sure they just like stayed there. But because for me, I had to stick with the teams because they were like specifically like press interview translators. But for me, I'm more just like because there's only two LCP teams and one of them also got knocked out very early. Like I'll just be their translator for everything because most other teams, they have a team handler who also, for example, like Chinese teams, they have a team handler who speaks like fluent English, for example. But our LCP team handlers, I guess it's also partially because their English wasn't as fluent. I think it's pretty fluent though, but it's also just because they have me, so they might as well just like ask me to tag along because my English is better, and also I am there as an official translator, and so they can focus on something else. But usually, for example, for teams in general, any team, if they, let's say the people from the stage or like they need to call this specific team to get ready because their match is coming up, they will usually do it through the team handlers, and the team handlers usually always speak like pretty good English. So, and also like the language that the team speaks, right? So usually that is kind of their kind of team translator when it comes to like official things. But I'm not too sure why. Maybe it's because they wanted to like onboard me a little more, like let me do a little more things because it's my first experience with it. I'm not sure. I'm just speculating here. But I was effectively kind of their team translator. I stuck with them when a lot of things, like when they went elsewhere for like a shoot for media days, when they were filming content for social media, when they were filming the trailers, when they were doing the voice lines. Pretty much they just asked me, hey, we need you to come translate these instructions to players, essentially. And so
you
I
were
was
the opposite
most
of
the time,
homeless.
yes, but I'm about to get to this. So I was basically just sticking with them, but also, first of all, but also I'm not assigned to a team because I have two teams that I need to like stick with. And also I was just kind of stuck in between this official staff status and this press translation status. So I'm not sure like which category I belonged in. I'm not sure if I should kind of stick with the people who were doing press interviews, doing communications, or if I should stick with the competitive side, which was, team handlers and the team players, whatever. But I think I don't think it's a bad thing because I think it is something that I want to like both get experience of because this is my first time doing this, and I think it was very insightful in the sense that like I was given this, I guess, freedom to just like go wherever I want. I could sneak into the press room if I'm not sneaking. I'm like walking into the press room if I want it because I'm there a lot when it comes to press interviews, and I can also hang out with the team because I need to translate for them when it comes to certain instructions. But the homeless part comes when the first 2 days of Swiss stage, all teams were playing, right? And CFO and PSG for both days, they were like scheduled the earliest and the latest. So I had to be there like usually when before the match or like during the match, whatever, staff and players, they have like this room that they could stay in, and I would usually just like stay in the room with them anyways. But when they leave, there's another team that's like coming in to take their room, so I can't stay there. So I'll just have to like kind of sit on the hallway until PSG comes or like until CFO comes. So that's like the homeless part I was talking about, like because sometimes I would just like not have somebody to like tag along with. But during those like I guess downtime, I could just like I was also just like given the freedom to just like walk around and talk to random people. I could also just like stick with the just like stage staff, whatever. They know that I have nowhere to be, so they're like, yeah, you can just stay with us, whatever. So it's not terrible. I think it's just like a little funny how I just like people would ask me, oh, like, do you need to do something? Like, I was like, no, I'm just like waiting for the team to come. Like, I'm literally just like stalling because I don't have a job right now. But yeah, so I usually stick with the teams usually before matches, when they were just like when they're doing their hair and makeup, like I would translate for the makeup artist to like ask them, oh, if you want anything specific, are you okay with concealer? Most of them say no to concealer, by the way. Or like, how do you want your hair done, whatever. And then into the match, I I was helping out with the referee situation because like usually there'll be a referee and another person on stage who's supposed to be translating, but this time around the referee is Chinese, so we don't really need a translator for that. And then post match, obviously there will be interviews and sometimes there will be content shoots where it's just more of like a Riot's official like photographer or videographers telling us. It would be like a sometimes it will be a social media clip, for example, like asking them kind of like silly questions. Some other times it would be this formal like lighting and scene, whatever, mic'd up interview that like records their voice lines, for example. Like we've seen a lot of pre-match trailers of them like dropping bars and then just like having a video of them taken during media day, whatever. So that's also kind of separately recorded, and usually someone else conducts the interview, and I basically also translate that said interview, but mostly just for a voice line recording purpose. Like, hey, what do you want to say to your next opponent, whatever. And then I would just tell the player like, hey, so he wants you to like drop like a aura forming line, so like try to do it cooler. Like that would be kind of what I do after matches as well, on top of doing press interviews.
That's hilarious. Can you put a little bit more aura farming in your quote?
No, yeah, I've said that multiple times because like I would translate what the player said, and then the guy would just be like, I was like, okay, I get it. And I would tell the player that he wants you to like be meaner. He wants you to like tell your opponents that like we will fuck you up, something like that. And they'll be like, oh, okay, I get it. Like it is a lot of like that. Not saying that like they're like being ingenuine or whatever, but sometimes like they just need. I know that like they need content. They need to like they want them to say a specific thing to like fit the narrative that they want in of the video, and like trying to convey that message across is a little bit difficult, I feel like, because I feel like certain instructions are easier in English. Like for example, what does it mean to you to do this, right? We don't really have a direct translation for that in Chinese, so I always have to like kind of beat around the bush and just say like, okay, so like he wants to know that like what's the significance of this event for you and your teammate and your region, whatever. Like I need to elaborate a lot more because there isn't like a word for word translation to what does this win mean to you in Chinese, for example.
Yeah, it's very interesting because obviously I can't speak to it in like Chinese, but there are these types of questions of like, what is your determination, right? That in Korean they always ask like, can we just hear like in the press conferences all the time and be like, what the hell are these questions? And like it's usually you don't understand the culture, right? But it's like they'll be like they'll ask Faker, what is your or BDD like before the finals, like what is your determination going into that match? And then people are just, and then their answer is like, we're gonna play our best and we're gonna try our hardest. And like BDD was like, I'm not worried about like winning. I just want to play as best as I can, and then everything else will follow. And obviously they give different answers, but it's like, what even is that question, right? But it's like, oh, you don't understand why they would be asking that question. And it's funny because the other thing that I noticed is I've been doing internationals for 2 years now. And one thing that always happens in press conferences is that the Chinese media will ask a question. The person will answer a question. So normally I notice it with Korean pros because like I said, I speak Korean. So Chinese to Korean translations will happen. And they'll ask, like, what do you think of top esports? Just random example. They'll ask Otter, what do you think of top esports? And he'll answer. And then the English media will go and they'll ask, hey, what do you think of top esports? They're your next opponent. And then Oner will answer. And then they'll ask in Korean. And they're like, what do you think of top esports? And then he'll be like, what the hell? But every time the Chinese don't understand. I guess the Korean should know not to ask the same question. But then like they already came up with their question and that's what they're planning on writing an entire article based on it. So they can't really change the question. So they have to ask the same question again. So I thought last year, a very vivid example is Knight had this incredibly horrific Tristana play where he I don't remember if you remember, but it was like game 4 of the finals of MSI, and he jumps with Tristana. He was playing Tristana. He bombs the tower, not the Ashe. It was like Nexus towers. He was trying to end the game. He like splits damage between hitting the Ashe and hitting the tower. Doesn't kill either one, dies, and they lose the game. And he got asked that question in every single language to the point that he was just like, I'm not answering this again. And the translator had to literally say, do not ask him this again. And I'm pretty sure like not, a lot of people were like, well, what do you mean again? I never asked it. But it's like he answered it 3 times.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's happened less because Riot in 2025 has moved away from press conferences slowly. And so that situation is happening less and less. But it's always funny to see the same question asked in multiple different languages. And the player is just like, what am I supposed to do?
I think on that note, because again, like there wasn't like a press conference, at least for play Swiss stage and quarterfinals. But we did have a press conference for LCP finals, and that was like how all of the interviews were conducted through the media. And that like I don't think it was as bad as asking like directly duplicated questions, but it will be a lot of similar things like, oh, what do you feel about coming into like visiting, what do you feel about Vietnam? Like, what do you think about Vietnam, for example? Like, what do you think about this arena? Like, what do you think about this match? It would just like be a lot of similar things, and their responses will always be similar. Like, oh yeah, it's really cool. I love the food here, whatever. Because obviously, even if they're asked about, oh, how do you feel coming into LCP finals, whatever, obviously they're also going to talk about like how they're adjusting to the environment, whatever. And that would also happen in terms of like even just like between Viet and Chinese and English as well. Like I feel like most people there do understand English, but even listening, maybe they weren't listening, whatever. But like even hearing like my translated answers, they would still kind of ask similar questions. And like you said, I think it's just like that's their list of questions that they need to write an entire article out of. So I kind of understand that.
Yeah, there was another thing where like you had online questions that you'd have to type them in chat. And so you would type the question in chat, but then if someone asked the same question but on the microphone and they didn't really hear what or like weren't paying attention to what you already asked, they would end up repeating a question that was already written in chat and answered, and they just didn't realize it. So things like that do happen. I think Riot after a while got a lot better at like saying, hey, this was already answered, or like combining. He's like, hey, we're combining 2 questions from these 2 platforms, so they're asking the same thing, and then they mention it. So that definitely helped. But I thought also it was very interesting that you went from being, hey, you are in charge for translating LCP teams interviews to you are an LCP team translator, and not just for interviews. Like you're hanging out with the team, which is obviously very different than what you would expect from like a translator, right? Especially since, like you said, like Chowie speaks fluent English. He could easily translate like instructions to his players or whatnot. Like it wouldn't be too much of an issue. But it's kind of, it must have been a really cool experience then, because you're not just translating for the players, you're like hanging out with them at that point.
Yeah, because especially obviously during like before the matches, like it would be like a lot, I guess not a lot, but they would be actually like watching, for example, like the previous game, so actually talking about like what they're gonna do in the next game. But for media days, it was a lot different because they would just be told to like pose or like take photos, and a lot of times there's a lot of downtime for maybe we're just shooting one player this time, and then there'll just be a lot of downtime for like other people. And it was a lot of just like sitting around waiting for maybe like the photographers to come or like the rest of the team to come, whatever. So yeah, it was a lot of just like hanging around with the team, which was interesting just because of how I guess I was never directly involved in Tier 1 esports. Like I was more of like a fan or like a community member. I was just like following them, and to me it was just weird like being almost like coworkers to like the people you're trying to follow, or like you're like these celebrities that that to you it was like oh, this is someone I look up to, or like, oh yeah, I'm only gonna meet them, talk to them like during a meet and greet, whatever. And then now like I just hang out with them for the whole day, and I think that's something I quickly got over. But at first it was really weird, mostly just because like there needs to be, especially for my role specifically, a translator that sticks with the team all the time. I feel like there needs to be a certain level of like professionalism that comes to that. So for example, like for journalists, for example, I think it would be totally in their rights to say, hey, can I take a picture with you after the interview? You know, or like if you're a host, it will be totally reasonable. If you're Ji-sun, for example, it will be like she takes photos, they take photos with players all the time. Obviously, partially because they know each other, because they've seen each other in multiple tournaments, whatever, and also because they usually have their own social media that they're running, like doing content. So it's just like, hey, I took a photo with Baker, you know, or for example. But I felt like it wasn't like explicitly prohibited, but I felt like I wasn't in a place to do that just because I was someone that was working so closely with the team. I'm almost like their like vice team handler who had to like relay the instructions and tell them kind of it was weird for me at first because it was just like, dude, if I took a photo, like, because I obviously saw like most of the players in person. I was thinking like, dude, if I took a photo with Faker, that's just gonna blow up on Twitter. But I couldn't do that just because I knew that like it would be kind of inappropriate for me to do it. Not because anyone explicitly has told me not to, but it was just like a kind of like myself evaluation of the situation that okay, I am now kind of associated with a team and I'm like their kind of staff, official staff, and I just feel like it wasn't appropriate to um do anything that was like that I personally wanted, whether that was like a signature or like a photo or anything like that. Yeah.
I guess there are some downsides. Like you said, it is self-imposed, but it's also like reading the room, be like, yeah, I don't know that I really should be doing this. But you actually made a really good point at the beginning of like, I used to just be like a fan, and all of a sudden, I'm like this liaison for the team that I was just like cheering on. Must be
Yeah.
very, very weird. But you also do another thing, and I want to transition to that. You actually work with Blue Otter. You do a lot of cool stuff. Like literally today, a few hours ago, you made the NA tag team like thing, like mock up in like, I don't know, 20 minutes or something, like really, really quick. I thought that was really, really cool. But you obviously do other
Thank
stuff
you.
for Blue Otter, which is a tier 2 team in North America. Can you talk maybe a little bit about like what it is your role, what your role is on Blue Otter?
Yeah, so I was basically brought in as a social media manager. I think they just wanted someone to like help out with tweeting stuff, and pushing out content. But because I also had a lot of experience with graphic design and also our graphic designer, I'm pretty sure she has like a day job. And like a lot of times whenever we needed something last minute or we needed something to like come out in a short notice, like that it would be like more difficult. So I also kind of just like say, hey, you know what? Um, I'll just make the graphic that I'm gonna post because usually like most of the time they go hand in hand. Like I'm my previous any like experiences like doing student clubs, whatever. If you're the marketing person, you're most of the time also in charge of making the graphic. And that should not be the case, but to me, I felt like being the person that is able to do both, I felt like that was actually very beneficial because I was able to like execute my own vision instead of having to like go back and forth with, let's say, our graphic designer or go back and forth with our marketing person if it doesn't fit their vision. So to me, I think it kind of worked out. And also, I feel like I also it was summer. I had a lot of time on my hands because I didn't have an internship, partially because I wasn't applying enough. I just like I don't know, I just didn't log in. So my sophomore summer, like I didn't have an internship like most people did. So for me, it was mostly almost like a full-time job to be like chronically online. Just like I was just like in my room and just doing stuff that I wanted to do, or like I know that it was gonna be funny or it's gonna be cool. And so I think to be fair, I had a lot of time on my hands because I was just in my room the entire day. I would wake up at noon and I would just like be on Photoshop for the next 12 hours and then just like tweet like 20 things, you know? So I think that partially, I guess, contributed to my social media presence and also just like activity of Blue Otter because most people in tier two um do this part time. Like none of us are because we're not really getting paid enough. So none of us are actually doing this as a full-time job. But I was able to do that because I was at home, like I didn't have to do anything anyways. So I think it's just a big part of I guess our success. Did we succeed? Maybe, but like a
I
big
mean,
part
you
of I
made it
guess our
to LTA finals. I would consider
oh
that a
yeah, I guess
success.
that's true. That's true. I think we did, but like I just don't know if I want to like credit that directly to like me. You know what I mean? But I do feel like our I guess growth in social media presence or like making a lot of people notice it more with I guess the different variations that I was doing for our match announcements, for example, or my attempt of trying to do more content with the players, asking, doing like a Google, like a group chat, Google form, whatever. I think I was also largely due to the fact that I had a lot of time on my hands and I was able to do it. Like for example, obviously right now I still have a lot of ideas to how to do more with Blue Otter, how to do more with USC esports, but I also have school to balance, and also just like a lot of other things. So I feel like time constraint is actually like a very legit problem. And I was just like able to overcome that by having way too much time on my hands. And I was just like doing whatever I wanted. And also because it was a tier 2 organization that didn't, I guess, have very clear structure. And also like we're not getting paid. So I felt like a lot of things that I guess wouldn't fly in like an official, let's say tier 1 or a professional organization. Before we tweet something or before we make something, it needs to get approval from like management, whatever. We didn't have to do that. And like after I got kind of like a better grasp of what the brand of Blue Otter is, I was pretty much I was allowed to do whatever I wanted. I didn't have to like ask someone, hey, is it okay if I make this graphic? I had the account. I was just doing whatever. And so I feel like that also sped up a lot of processes as to like being reacting to certain trends in time, or like replying to certain people in time, or like just doing things in real time. I felt like it being such an amateur organization also helped with that because I wasn't restricted, even as someone who just joined it.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention USC, but obviously you do work with your university esports team, which is like kind of crazy. But one thing I did notice, and you said this almost like in both like jobs, I guess, is you tend to take responsibility and do things that aren't like in your job description, if that makes sense. Like with Blue Otter, you're like, well, I'm not the graphics person, but let me tweet 20 things and make graphics for all of them. And then you're like, well, I'm the translator, but you know what else I could do is I could tell the guy to or a farmer, like, obviously you're like giving him permission, like, hey, they actually want you to speak a little bit more candid. But like just in general, it seems to be like you really want to be more involved, or you really enjoy taking responsibility and giving that extra, 110% into things that you do. Is that something you do for everything, or is that specifically like your love for League of Legends?
I think that is something I tend to do with things that I really enjoy doing, or like a cause that I can get behind. Because I think I am a very, I guess I'm a very results driven person. I don't really care about like how much work I put into something, or like whether, let's say, me and you were in a team. I don't really care if you contribute as much as me, as long as our end product is good. So I think that mentality kind of allowed me to, for example, do a lot of things volunteer for a lot of things. For example, I'm not getting paid for Blue Otter. I'm not getting paid to do anything USC esports related, obviously. But I volunteer for a lot of things. People ask me, hey, I actually need a graphic for this, or even just like them proposing an idea, and if it's something I can get behind, I was like, you know what, I want that to happen, so I would do it. I think partially it is because I'm still in school, and also I'm fortunate enough to be in a financial situation where I don't have to like balance work and school. But I think it's also because I think I am a very, like, if I like something, I don't really care if I have to be the one that's like working overtime to finish something, or working overtime to deliver something. If I feel like the results will be good, I will do it. And so yeah, maybe I think that is also why I was able to, I guess, allow myself to commit so much time into different responsibilities, especially the ones that aren't paid, because I feel like, for example, tier 2, I feel like a big reason why it's, I guess, understaffed, or just like not operating as well as how people would like it, is because nobody is getting paid enough to do these things. And I think it's totally in their right to not put as much effort into something that's like only a part-time, or like something that they don't get paid doing. But and I don't think it's fair to like expect everyone to also putting as much time and effort into something that as they would do as for a full-time job. But yeah, I think that's also my method of, I guess, stacking out my portfolio and resume when I still can, just because if you offer free work, nobody's ever going to kind of reject it. But if you're like, hey, I will only do this graphic design if you pay me like $50, and then they would be like, maybe not.
Do you enjoy it?
But yeah.
Because
What
it sounds like there's
specifically?
some enjoyment in like going above and beyond and like doing the free work and volunteering and just getting the things done.
I think I'm driven by external validation in the sense that like if I don't really care. Well, first of all, I don't really care if I get paid doing something. But as long as it gets good feedback. For example, if let's say I push out a well-designed graphic or like a nice drawing for Blue Otter, for example, and if it gets good impressions to me, I think that's how I get validated, and that's how I would be encouraged to do more. And obviously this manifests in other methods as well. Like if I contribute a lot in, let's say, UC esports, at some, and then like people would say like, oh, thank you for always like doing this much, or like people agreeing with a project that I initiated, or like supporting, liking the cause that I'm trying to push. I think that's what motivates me, and I do enjoy doing it a lot actually. It's just like I don't think it's a good habit to have, because I feel like once I graduate I need to like start thinking about how to like monetize that, you know. But to me, I think when it comes to when you propose to me a cause that I can get behind, or something that I like or I want to support, I think it's really hard for me to like not say, you know what, put me on, like I'll help you with that, like I want that to happen.
Which I noticed. I just for those when I went to LTA finals, I actually hung out with Blue Water. Like I shared a B&B with a bunch of Blue Water
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
and I noticed that Blue Water like has this very unique ability of hiring or getting people who are very talented, like yourself, and also very just like kind of like what you said, motivated to and disciplined to do a lot of work. And actually, that was one thing when you guys had your booth at the LTA finals. And that was one thing that I went to Beans and Trashy multiple times who were working there and be like, hey, I heard like you guys haven't moved. You guys haven't gone around and like enjoyed the fan fest. You guys got to leave. Like if you want me to take the table, I will, but you can't just like not do anything. You're not being paid. You're just hanging out, chill. Like you gotta go, like see your favorite player, take a picture, do something. Um, I think it's obviously very heartwarming to see that much love and effort being put into like the esport that I love. But at the same time, it's like a worry of burning yourself out. Or obviously, right now you're a student, but then even as a student, you could put too much on your plate and then eventually just be fed up with things. You know?
Mhm. Yeah, that's something like it's funny you mentioned that. Like that did remind me because, for example, I did like on the first day I did have like around like maybe half an hour just like check out other booths because I was just like curious. Um,
And
but
then
there
you
were a
came
lot
to
of other
help me
people.
instead of going around. I remember that.
No, yeah, but that was like midway through going around. I was like, "What? This is cool." Like, I wonder what you're doing. So I don't know. I think also we all share the same sentiment because I was also like talking to Beans, who was there the entirety of 2 days. He didn't go anywhere at all. He was just behind the booth. But I was telling him like, dude, we have enough people now. Like, if you want to check out the booth, like you can. But like most of us genuinely like want to stay there to help because we enjoy, I guess, promoting our team. Also, just like talking to people. At least me personally, I enjoyed, I guess, actually explaining to people who we are and them realizing, oh, this is actually kind of cool, or like, oh, you guys actually are doing a lot for a tier 2 organization, or oh, this is interesting. And seeing them, especially like it's kind of mind blowing to me seeing them like buying our merch the first day and then wearing our shirt the second day. I was like, holy shit, you're actually wearing Blue Otter merch. Like you don't even know who we are, you know. But I think just like seeing that results like immediately after, a day after, and also just like people on Twitter saying that like, oh yeah, shout out Blue Otter for, you know, they're only tier 2, but like they're here today. Like people who didn't know us beforehand actually being invested in our activities and what we're doing. I don't know, I think that to me was very motivating. And to me, I don't really care. Like we did pay everything out of pocket, like B&B, plane tickets, whatever. But it was, I don't know. I think it was, and also just like being there for the entire day, um, with no shifts whatsoever because we had too much going on. I feel like I believe that the reason why my other Blue Otter staff was also able to just be there the entire day and just volunteer everything is also because they're motivated.
Oh crap! Sorry, this thing keeps disconnecting. Uh, hello? Can you can you speak? Hello, hello?
Hello?
Yeah, okay, it's working again. I don't know what's going on, but all right, I can hear you
You're
now.
good. Yeah, but no, it was just I was just like rambling along, but it was just
Okay.
I think we're all motivated by I guess, being able to convince people or influence people into also getting behind our cause or like being affected by our passion, I think that's something that's actually very, very motivating. Like I think way more rewarding than things.
So here's my last question for you. What I'm an up and coming inspired like by you, and I want to also translate for I don't know whatever region that I'm from. Do you have any advice for someone who wants to be like involved in translating for professionals in the LoL esports scene?
I think, well, first of all, I want to preface by saying that I don't think I'm very qualified to give, I guess, just like that, because like, to be fair, I do acknowledge the fact that I think I was very lucky to have to receive this opportunity because it really just kind of like fell onto my lap because I didn't apply for anything. I wasn't trying to establish myself as a professional translator. Um, for me, it was really just like a, hey, I care about this. I want more people to see this. Let me try to do this. And then someone noticed and they're like, hey, you know what have you translated for us professionally? So I think for me it was a lot of luck. But I feel like if you want to get into esports, gaming, whatever, online culture, anything that's like related, like an internet industry, I think the best thing you can do is just like network and like network when it comes to esports. It's really just more of making friends instead of saying like, hey, good afternoon. I am very impressed by your resume. Like it's not like doing that on LinkedIn. It's a lot of just like we both play the same game, and so that is like an immediate connection to hey, let's talk about the game, or like let's talk about what we care about, or whatever. So I would say, I guess, just talk to as many people as possible. Try to know different people, just because I feel like esports is an industry where a lot of recruitment or a lot of just involvement is from word of mouth. It's like if I want to start a project, I would just ask someone that hey, do you know anyone? Or like, do I know anyone? Instead of posting a job listing, for example. So I feel like knowing people definitely helps a lot. When it comes to when it comes to like translation specifically, um, I think again, I am also not very qualified to speak on this because I feel like I was raised bilingual almost. I spoke a lot more Chinese as a kid. But I think I was able to do this a lot easier because it was a lot easier for me because I wasn't someone that like learned English when I was like 16 years old and I had to like start from zero. I was already consuming a lot of, although I wasn't speaking as much English, but I was consuming a lot of like Western and like English content online as a kid. And I think that also goes back to what you're saying about some translators, they can translate things directly, but they can't translate in-game references or like certain cultures. And I think I was able to do it mostly because I was online so much. Like I was on the Taiwanese internet, I was also on the Western internet so much that I know what is the equivalent of things. I was also playing League in Chinese before I was on the Taiwanese client. It was like my things were in Chinese, so I kind of most items I know what the Chinese names are. My friends also still talk about League in Chinese, my high school friends. So they would know like certain abbreviations or certain nicknames to call certain champions or items or certain game modes, whatever. But yeah, I think that I feel like I was able to do it largely, and I largely contributed to my very disgusting amount of internet screen time. Uh, but I do think that when it comes to translating anything just like technical, not technical, but like anything that references a specific culture or a specific title or game, whatever, it really does help like interacting with said media in both languages. So for example, I still play League with my high school friends and they refer to everything in Chinese, but I also play League with my friends over here who refers to everything in English, and also I consume League stuff mostly in English now because of Twitter or whatever. So yeah, I feel like translations for esports, I feel like specifically you kind of just have to grow up in two different, I guess, internet cultures to kind of understand that. And that does require like a large amount of screen time. But
Just out of
yeah,
curiosity,
mhm.
and you don't have to do this if
Go
you
ahead.
want to, but what's your screen time today?
Today
Yeah.
I wasn't. I'm not on my phone a lot, like, because I was
Okay.
in class today, so I was on my like laptop. But I basically, when I wake up, if I go to class, I'm always on my laptop, and then when I come back home, I'm on my PC anyways. But I can't tell you that my Twitter screen time, like on my iPhone, it's like at least 2 hours a day. Like it doesn't sound like a lot, but like it is like it's there's no TikTok for you to scroll. There's no reels for you to scroll on Twitter. I'm just like literally looking at people's tweets and just like replying to people like that. I spent a lot of time on social media, and I feel like that did help in the sense that like I was a lot more kept up than a lot of my other friends. Like I would be the first one to know that, oh, like they signed this new player or like they kicked someone off, whatever. Like I was just like, but it's just something that I enjoy. I think it differs with like person to person. So
I think there's
yeah,
one
I
more
don't know.
thing from your experience, from hearing your story, that I think maybe other people could take, and maybe you can correct me if it's not really something. But you actually, before you even got the opportunity to translate for LCP, you had like a almost like a passion project where you're just translating stuff to the point that there at some point, you know, I think it was PSG, they contact you, they're like, hey, could you like translate this for us on our website? Or maybe it wasn't PSG, but like you had,
Simple.
it was CFO, okay, and you had already done a lot of translating work before you even got the opportunity to do it, just out of love for like, hey, I want people to know more about this team because this team is so cool. So do you think that that is something that maybe they could do, or if they, you know, like if they're in the French scene, for example, they just start translating things from French to English?
Okay. On that article, I know what exactly like it's a Ginger article where he like his grandma like met in heaven, whatever. That was actually they actually didn't contact me. It was me who reached out to them. I was like, hey, I want to translate this article because I feel like a lot of interviews online, a lot of English interviews online of CFO are very repetitive. But this like because it was an interview conducted internally by the staff, so they were able to like they know what questions to ask. They know the players a lot better. And the players are also more comfortable opening up because it's someone they know and also because it was in Chinese. So I was just like telling them like, hey, I think this would be cool. Can I translate it? First of all, can I translate it? And second of all, after I translate it, um, can I just put this on your website as well? Because it's like free translation. Like who would say no to that, right? So and then after some back and forth, they said yes, and that's how it got onto the website. So it's actually again, it was me reaching out and offering a translation. And another thing also happened with Sheep Esports where they were interviewing the head of product for LCP. That one was also me reaching out asking like, hey, can I translate this? Because I feel like the Taiwanese audience would like love to see this. And I was just doing it for the love of the game. Like I know that like my friends would like to see this and I want to help out because of that. Although none of like they didn't ask me, they didn't pay me, whatever. But I wanted that information to like go through. So yes, do I think that it helped me in terms of landing a spot in working at Worlds or just like anything in general in my esports career 100%. And that's something like I kind of always tell people when they ask me, oh, how do I break into this industry? Because it is an industry that, you know, unfortunately doesn't have as much money and it's also just like an industry that's started like very like grassroots style. Like everything is just like most of the projects in its early stages are just people liking something, people having passion for something and doing it. And so I try to encourage people that hey, while you're still a student, while you don't have to like worry about getting a full-time job, if you have time, just like volunteer for things, like help out on things. And you know, to me, I feel like doing that on social media is the easiest for me because I don't need to like be in a certain area or be in a certain place physically. Um, but the same goes for like sometimes orgs would ask, hey, anyone wants to volunteer for this event, this boothing event that we have maybe, or like we're looking for someone to volunteer to moderate our Twitch chat, whatever. I feel like those are all good opportunities. Although yes, you don't get paid, but that's how you, I guess, if you want to think about it like this, is that's how they remember you as a person, and also just like being able to be behind the scenes and seeing that helping an event or helping like an information or like news or a piece of content go through and seeing other people enjoy that. I think that's something I I enjoy doing a lot. And also I feel like if you have a passion for esports, if you have a passion for just really anything in general, I think that would be enough to motivate you, I guess.
All right. Well, I mean, I can't really top anything you just said. Uh, if you have a passion for it, do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Thank you so much for your time.
Of course.
I want to say thank you so much to Vivian for coming on and sharing her experience as a translator. I have tried to ask other translators before to like talk about their experience and what it's like working with Riot, and it's not always their first priority, right? They're not necessarily content creators, they're not, pro players. They're in that weird little gray area where like, hey, this is my job, I enjoy doing it, but I'm not necessarily willing to go and talk on a podcast or an interview or something like that. So it's just really cool getting her experience and how like it's kind of different than other people's experience where she became like the LCP she became just like hanging out with CFO and like being friendly with the team. So it's yeah, like it's very different. It's just every person's gonna have their own unique experience for sure. And I'd like to be able to document more of that because world isn't made by one or two people or just the pros or just the analysts or just broadcast. It's made by every single person that works on it, whether it's Phil Choi or um, whoever it is, whether they're making the content, they're translating, they're the makeup artists in the backstage. I didn't know that most pros say no to concealer. I, not something I would have like guessed, right? Didn't even cross my mind. So it's just cool to get these little insights. So again, thank you so much for being on the channel.